Right. So we are in Gemarah Sanhedrin, Daf Tet Vav Amud Aleph 15a, and I have to give you a health warning. This isn't going to be an adult shiur, because some of the topics that we are going to look at today are a little unsavory, to say the least. Those of you who have looked ahead will know what I'm talking about. Those of you that haven't, then wait and see. Okay, so let's just see where we are up to and where we left off last time. We talked about last time grapes and hair that was ready to be cut off, and vines that were ready to be harvested. And what we spoke about was this idea in our Gemarah that there was a machloket, there was a discussion as to whether something that, like hair, which was ready to be cut, somebody had long hair, and remember we spoke about Zichron Menachem last week. We spoke about the cancer charity that collects long hair to make wigs for kids. Hair that's ready to be cut off. There was a machloket as to whether that was considered to be attached to a person and therefore subject to the laws of valuation of a person, or whether, since it was fitting and ready to be cut off but had not yet been done so, it was considered as if it had already been cut off and was therefore a movable object, which, as we learned the last couple of weeks, is subject to different types of laws of valuation. Different numbers of valuers are required, and different punishments are given if you use them illegally when they belong to the Bet Mikdash. And we asked the Gemarah asked the question, is this not very similar to a different argument that we have in a different Gemarah, which talked about vines? And that's where we're going to pick it up now. I'm going to share the screen with you. It's on page 78 for those who are in a Steinsaltz hard copy, and it is going to be on the screen in a second. It's 15a3 if you are in the Art Scroll Gemarah. Okay, so you should be able to see the Gemarah, can you? Yeah, good. Okay, so we're over here. Neymar, let us say, Hani Tanae, Kahani Tanae. These opinions of these Tanaim, these rabbis, are like these rabbis. So in other words, the Gemarah is saying, we've heard this machloket, this dispute before in slightly different terms, and we want to now establish whether the opinions held about the hair can be compared to the opinions held on the following case. Rabbi Meir Omer, Rabbi Meir says, Yesh dvarim, there are certain things, shehein kekarka, ve'enan kekarka, that in certain respects are like land, and in other respects are not like land. Now, we know from our previous learning that land has special laws. There are, when it comes to valuations, there are three types of valuation. There's people, things, movable things, and land. And we had that whole discussion about the various, how many numbers of judges or valuers were required when you are valuing either people, land, or things, based on the Mishnah, and also based on the parashah in Sefer Vayikra, which mentioned, if you remember, the word Kohen 10 times. And ultimately what we decided was that karka, land, required 10 valuers, one of whom needed to be a Kohen. So there are different halachot. We also learnt a halacha last week of miktzat kekulo. Modeh b'miktzat. Modeh b'miktzat. And that was the case, those of you who recall, where somebody admits a partial debt, or partially admits a debt, I should rather say more accurately. So somebody says, you owe me £100, and the other person says, no, I only owe you £60. So he is admitting that he owes £60, but he's not admitting that he owes the other 40. The halacha is, in modeh b'miktzat, the halacha is that the rest of the debt, so in our case, the £40 that he doesn't agree to, he has to make an oath about. And he says he is obliged by the court to pay the £60 that he agrees he owes, and then to take an oath that he does not owe the other £40. And then he's free from having to pay the £40. Many cases in that situation, the person says, I'd rather give the £100. I'm not going to take the oath, because even though I know I don't owe it, I don't take oaths. Taking an oath is a very, very serious matter in Judaism, and people will go to great lengths to avoid taking an oath. And if in that scenario, if they were faced with the case of having to give £40 to somebody that they believe they didn't owe, rather than taking an oath, they would choose to pay the money. But that's be that as it may. The halacha is that they are able, if they wish, to take an oath about the remaining part of the debt. Now, that does not apply to land. So, for example, somebody comes to somebody else and says, you owe me 2 acres of land. I bought 2 acres of land from you and you haven't given them to me. And the guy says, no, you only bought 1 acre of land. I agree, I owe you 1 acre of land. In a normal movable item situation, that's modeh b'miktzat, he would then theoretically have to give him the acre and swear about the other acre. That's not the halacha with land. You do not, he does not swear with modeh b'miktzat with land. So it makes a difference whether something is considered to be attached to the ground and is considered like land or not. And that's what our Gemarah is talking about here. Rabbi Meir says there are certain things which are in some regard are like land, and in other respects are not like land. Ve'ein chachamim modim lo. And the sages, the rabbis, ein, did not modim lo. What does that mean? Modim. Modim anachnu lach. What does that mean? Michael, what does that mean?
We bow to you.
Okay, well, that's right.
Modim
means to bow, but it doesn't really mean to bow, does it? What's the Hebrew word for to bow? You do know it. You say it every day in Aleinu L'Shabeach. Anachnu korim u mishtachavim. Okay, so bowing down is mishtachavim. Modim, although it has come to mean bow down, and when we say modim anachnu lach in Shmona Esra, we do bow down. What does the word actually mean? What's the root of the word?
I thought it's from being thankful or grateful.
Yes, it is. It is the same root as todah, thankful, but it also means to admit. To admit. So when we say anachnu modim lach, we are saying to Hashem in Shmona Esra, we thank you and we admit, we recognize you. We recognize your what it is that we're going to say. Anachnu modim lach. We thank you for all the things that you give us, the wonders, the miracles, all the things that we say in modim. So ve'ein chachamim modim lo means, the meaning here in the Gemara is that the sages did not agree with him, did not admit that he was right, or did not recognize him as being correct. So, and I just used the word, if you remember. What did I say was the Hebrew term for the guy who admits a partial debt? I said it was modeh b'miktat. Modeh b'miktat. He admits katzat. You know what katzat is? A little bit. So modeh b'miktat means that he admits a bit of the debt, i.e. not the whole debt. So we have here a situation. Rabbi Meir says there are certain aspects that it's like land, certain aspects that it's not. Ask the Gemara, Ketzad, what's the case? How's that? What is it we're talking about? And they give us a case. Eser gefanim, 10 vines. You can see the word gefen there in there. Yes, that's a plural of gefen. 10 vines. Te'unot. Te'unot. This is a really interesting word because there are many very, very, very modern Hebrew words that are based on that word there. When I say very, very modern, I mean in the last 20, 30 years. Who can read my mind? What modern Hebrew word comes from this word, which only came into use in the last few decades? Who can read my mind? David, can you read my mind?
Tzeunat drachim. Traffic.
No,
traffic.
I think that's with a taf actually. What do you do when your phone is out? It's got no battery. You charge it, correct, Julia? You charge it. What is a charger in Hebrew? Anybody know? You need to know this when you lose your charger and you want to go into a shop and ask for a charger. You could always say charger and they will know what you mean. But the Hebrew word for charger is mat'en. Mat'en. And this word here, tu'una, means loaded. It means loaded. This 10 good vines, tu'unot, loaded. It's loaded with grapes. So a mat'en, of course, is the causative verb. And when you're asking for a mat'en, you're asking for the thing that will cause your phone to become loaded with charge it up. So a mat'en is a charger. Okay, so eser gefanim, 10 vines, tu'unot, they're loaded with grapes. Masarti lecha. And somebody gives you these to look after for them, okay? Either as a paid guardian or an unpaid guardian, doesn't make a difference. Somebody says, I'm going away, please look after these 10 laden vines. And then he comes back and he says, I want them back now, please. Can you please give me back my 10 vines? V'hala omer. And the other one says, no, einan ela chamesh. You only gave me 5, not 10. So that is what? That is modeh b'miktzat, right? He's admitted part of the debt. He's admitted that he has to give him back 5 vines, but he does not admit to the other 5. Now, our question now is he obliged to take an oath or not? Because are these vines considered to be connected to the ground, or are they considered to be not connected to the ground? You can see the parallel between the hair case, right? We know these vines are connected to the ground, right? because otherwise they wouldn't grow, right? They're connected to some kind of soil, not be just floating in thin air. The question is not about the vines. The question is about the grapes. The grapes that are hanging there, that are loaded, that are charged up on the vine. Our previous case that we were looking to see whether there was a parallel was the case of somebody who had long hair. Halavai had long hair, right? And he was ready to have it cut. He was going to have it cut and give it to sell it or give it away or whatever. And he gives the value of this hair. Now, the question was, is this hair which has not yet been cut, is it considered still part of the person, in which case the valuation has to be done in a different way because it's a person and not a thing? Or is it considered already disconnected because it's ready to disconnect? It's ready to be cut. Now, our grape situation is the same thing. Do we consider these grapes which are hanging off the vine, ready to be harvested? Do we consider that they are still connected to the ground and should be treated as land? Because after all, they are still physically connected. The grapes are connected to the tree and the tree is connected to the ground. Or do we consider, I'm trying to turn this phone off, I don't know where it is. I guess it will go off on its own in a minute. Okay. Or do we consider these grapes as if they've already been harvested because they're ready to be harvested? So you can see, can't you, the connection between the two cases. So if we say that he needs to make an oath on these grapes, right, then that will tell us that they are things and not land, because we only make an oath on a partial debt if it is a thing and not a land. So Rabbi Meir mechayev, Rabbi Meir obliges the person to make an oath. So we will say, won't we, that Rabbi Meir is the same opinion as the opinion further up here, who says that hair that is ready to be cut is considered as if it's already cut. It's a thing. It's not connected to the person. On the other hand, Chachamim Omrim, the Chachamim says, no. If it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it's a duck. Kol hamechubar lekarka harehu kakarka. The whole time that it is connected to the ground, it is considered like ground. Don't bring me no chokhmas that says it's ready to be cut and therefore it's as if it's been cut, these grapes. No, they're still hanging on the tree and therefore they're considered like the tree. This is the machloket between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. And what the Gemara wants to say is that this is the same machloket. It's the same concept as the haircut situation. Sounds reasonable? Anybody without looking on got any objections to that comparison? Yes, Julia, come on, tell us. Unmute.
Just that we deal with people separate from land. There are separate rules for people as there are for land. And I don't think it's the same compare. I mentioned last week that I actually think that hair, the follicles are alive, but the hair that grows from the head is already not alive, whereas the grapes that are growing are still growing and they are very much alive. I don't think it's a good comparison.
That is a really interesting opinion. I want to just, I just want to confirm what I think you're saying. What you're saying is they're not comparable because the hair is dead, even though the follicles is still alive. And once it's dead. It's not a living thing anymore. Whereas the grapes are still growing all the while, whilst they're still connected to the vine. That's what you're saying, yeah?
I am saying, but I also very strongly believe that there's a big differential between humans and land. And I'm a land lawyer, and I'm very much into land and the special
Okay,
rules. that apply.
we accept that. What we're dealing with here is the concept of whether something which is still connected to something else, doesn't matter whether it's a person or land. It's the idea of the connection that we're talking about. The idea as to whether something which is still connected can be considered to be disconnected. Okay, forget that we're not talking about, we're talking apples and oranges, if you'll pardon the pun, land and people. I fully accept that. The concept is the connection, and I want to take you on your first point, because the Gemarah, interestingly, has your view, but then turns it on its head. And let's go on and we'll see. Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina says, we must be dealing with a case as follows. We're dealing with a case, ba'anavim, with grapes, ha'omdot libatzer, which are, we had this expression omed before when it was omed ligzoz, the hair. It was just ready to be cut. Remember, the hair was ready to be cut. Here, says Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina, we're dealing with grapes that are ready to be harvested, to be picked. Interesting word, this, batzer. In Hebrew, there are different words for picking of grapes, for picking of olives, and for picking of wheat. We would use, I think, probably in English, you use the word harvest, which would cover all of them. You would harvest wheat, you would harvest the grapes, you would harvest the olives. I think that would be a reasonable thing to say. In Hebrew, there are different words for each of the products. So you cannot botzer olives. Okay, botzer only applies to grapes. I can't remember the word for olives off the top of my head. Somebody will remind me.
Is that where the name Batsra comes from?
Yes, because there's lots of vines in Batsra.
Okay. And I can see the difference very, very much from the way you harvest those three things. One you cut, one you beat, and one you pick and winnow. So it seems to me it's not it is a distinction with a difference.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I think that and possibly, Sharon, I don't know. It's very sad that Leon isn't with us anymore. Leon's brother, of course, was a farmer. And whenever we had any farming questions, we always used to ask Leon. It may well be that people with farming knowledge will tell us that there are different words in English that people use for these things. And maybe it's only us townies that would not know that. But certainly in Hebrew, there are separate words. And your point is well made that they are different processes.
Now, Johnny, Larry and I were traveling last Wednesday and haven't caught up yet. It is only the hair of a slave, and a slave is a property. Is it a Gentile or a Jewish slave whose property is the hair? Whose hair is the property of the master? Secondly, it seems to me the grapes are similar to the hair, even with Julia's medical distinction, because at a point when the grapes are done growing, they then dry up and shrivel and are as dead as hair is hanging on the vine. The vine no longer feeds them.
Okay, great. We're getting there now. Julia's shaking her head, but let's do the Gemarah, because what we'll see actually is that Sharon is half right, according to the Gemarah, and Julia is half right, according to the Gemarah, and they're two different halves. Let's go on and you'll see what I'm talking about. Really interesting. So Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina says, we're talking about grapes that are ready to be harvested. Mar Savar, one master holds, and then this is Rabbi Meir, Kibtzurot Damyan, that they are considered as if they have been already cut, because they are ready to be cut, similar to the Tanakama with the hair situation. Umar Sava, and the other master, that means the rabbis, hold Lav Kivtzurot Damyan. They are not considered as if they have been cut. Okay? And says the Gemara, no, lo, you cannot say that this is the same argument. And they're going to make distinctions now, which will incorporate both some of Julia's view and some of Sharon's view. Listen to this. Lo, the Gemara says, no, you cannot prove from this case that the two opinions, the two cases are the same. Why? Afilu tema Rabbi Meir, maybe, even Rabbi Meir would say, Ad kan lo ka'amar v'Rabbi Meir hasam, kol kama teshav kalahu michechash kachachashe. So you can't prove it because according to the vine situation, Rabbi Meir says that they're already considered to be picked because of what Sharon just said. Once they are fully grown and fully matured and ripened, when you leave them on the tree, they start actually to deteriorate. And then you would lose the value of the grape. Remember, we're talking about valuation here. So let's say you've got some beautiful, lush, fully grown grapes, and they're ready to be harvested, and they are at their absolute peak, and they're worth 100 shekels a kilo. Okay, leave them 2 weeks on the vine, and they've started to get a bit dried out and a bit, moth-eaten and what have you, and then you take them off, they're only worth 50 shekels a kilo. Okay, so that's the point that Sharon was making, that if you don't take them off in time, they get worse. Now, what's the situation with the hair? Remember, we're taking it's about value. The hair will continue to grow and will be more valuable if you leave it. It may be dead, it may be alive, but if it's 12 inches long now and you cut it off and you can value that 12-inch plait at 100 shekels, leave it a bit longer and it's an 18-inch plait, it's worth more. So says the Gemara rather cleverly that the two cases are not the same. Now, what Julie was saying is that one's dead and one's alive, and she was saying the grapes are alive and the hair is dead. And that's why I said, well, the concept is right, but it's about value. And the Gemara is telling us that if you leave the hair a little bit longer, you'll get more money for your valuation. And if you leave the grapes longer, you'll get less. And so therefore the cases are not comparable. And so that's why the Gemara says, Ad kan lo ka'amar Rabbi Meir hatan. You cannot use Rabbi Meir's view here to say that he would support the hair case, because the hair, kol kama deshav kalahu, however long you leave it, ashbuche mashbach. Shevach is can you see the root of that word is shevach, which means praise. It improves, it gets better, it improves. So the hair improves, not necessarily because it's alive or it's dead, but because it's longer. And that's the point with these selling of the hair. The longer the hair, the more valuable it is to make wigs. So that's the interesting thing here. We've dismissed at this point the potential for these two arguments to be the same argument and to extrapolate Rabbi Meir's view on grapes to the hair case. A very interesting distinction made between the two. Now, there's a little H over here, which is halacha, and I'd like to try and find that. Here it is. Where's he telling us to go here? What's it about? Grapes that are considered to be picked. Here, I think this is it. Yeah, any item that is attached to the land Any item that's attached to the ground as the same status in halacha as land itself with regard to the halacha of inquisitions. It is no longer dependent on the ground, as with grapes that are ready to be picked, it has the status of movable property. So that means the halacha is according to Rebbe Meir, okay, not according to the Chachamim. Okay, the Ramah, citing Torah, says that as long as it is attached to the ground, it retains the status of land. So the Ramah disagrees with the first halacha here. We are Ashkenazim. We usually paskin like the Ramah, and so probably the Ashkenazim would hold that whilst those grapes are still attached, they're considered land. And probably the Sephardim, I don't know this, I'm just guessing, because normally the Sephardim go according to the Shulchan Aruch and the Ashkenazim go according to the Ramah. So be very interesting to know what that really is, but there you are, that's what we're told. Okay, now.
Johnny?
Yes, David?
Just before you move on, very interesting, you taught us the modern application of the word unot. The first biblical mention, or the first time the root is found in the Tanakh, is actually in the parashah in 2 weeks' time.
2 weeks' time, we're in Miketz Vayigash Vayechi.
Vayigash.
Oh, okay. Vayigash is next week for me. Okay. Okay, next week, Vayigash. Okay. So where do we find the root of Tet Ayin Nun, meaning to load up in Vayigash? I'm guessing, I don't know because I'm not as familiar with the words as you are, but I'm guessing it's something to do with Yosef collecting all the crops.
After that. Have a look. Bereshit Mem Hey Pasuk Yud Zayin.
Let's get it on the screen for you.
It's fascinating, modern day usage of charging a phone and how it's used here.
Okay, Bereshit, chapter 45, says David. Okay, and what verse?
Yud Zayin.
17. Okay, oh yes, look at that. Right, let me show you the screen. Let me show you the screen. You got it? Okay, so Jeffrey, our reader, is busy this morning with something. He did tell me what he was busy with, but I've forgotten. So here we are. Joseph is just revealed his identity to his brothers. And in verse 15, he says, and he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. Afterwards, his brothers spoke with him. And the voice was heard in Pharaoh's house saying, Joseph's brothers have come. And it pleased Pharaoh and his servants. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, tell your brothers, do this, load up your beasts and go, enter the land of Canaan and take your father and his households and come to me and I'll give you the best of the land. Verse 17, tell your brothers, do this, load up your beasts. Emor alachecha, say to your brothers, zot asu, this you should do. Ta'anu et be'irchem, ta'anu, load up, load up. Exactly the same word. Well done, David. That's excellent. We also, if I'm not mistaken, David, we have a halacha, do we not, in Parashat Kiteitzei, of Te'ina or Prika. We have a halacha and I think it's in the Parashat of Kiteitzei in Dvarim, that if you see your fellow's ox or donkey loaded up, there's no such word, laden up or loaded up with goods and it's struggling under the burden, you have a mitzvah to unload it.
That's to'er. Tough tet ayin hey.
Must be the same. Loading must be the same word. Loading and unloading. Let's go and have a look. Where will I find Kitei say which chapter of Devarim?
Early 20s.
Early 20s. Let's go for 23, shall we, to start with, and let's see if we can find it.
I think it's in Mishpatim, actually.
Do you?
Yeah.
I'll tell you why I think it's in Kitei, because I
Yeah.
seem to recall that was part of my son's bar mitzvah drosha. I could be wrong on that. It's like 20 years ago, but
according to the concordance, the root is found nowhere else in the Torah, only once in Tanakh.
Here we go. I've found it. There we go. And you are absolutely right, but it's not tet, it's taf.
Okay.
Wait a minute. Okay. I'm right about it being in Kitei, but it's in brackets. Look at this. Have you got the screen on, guys? Look over here in verse 4. You shall not see the donkey of your brother, Oshoro, or its ox, noflim baderech, fallen on the way. And look in the English, in brackets, under its load. Right? It's understood, it's not actually spoken. And you should not ignore them. Rather, in brackets, you shall pick up, and in brackets, the load with him. Hakim takim imo, you shall raise up the donkey. So the concept is there, so I was right about that, but I was wrong about the word. Okay, excellent, David. Thank you. We'll go back to your one, which is there clearly. Load up your donkeys, load up your beasts, and go and enter the Canaan, and bring your father and his households down. Ta'anuet bi'irchem. So whoever thought of the word for a charger as mat'en is a very clever guy. Right, excellent. Let's go back to the Gemarah. Thank you for that great insight. Let's find the Gemarah again.
Johnny, may I ask a question?
Of course.
When you gave us the example of a dispute about whether it was 100 shekels or 60 shekels, I'm curious about the burden of proof, because you said the person claiming it was less could supply an oath in addition to paying the 60. But you could also say the person who said it was 100 might have to swear an oath, and therefore that person would receive the payment. So I was just curious whether there's discussion of burden of proof when there is a dispute about the quantity of land or the quantity of money.
Yes, there is, Larry, and it is a similar idea. It's a similar idea to English law, and I suspect American law as well, but you'll correct me if I'm wrong, that the burden of proof is on the claimant. So in Hebrew, it is called, who knows what that's called in Hebrew? It's a famous expression, and it is the literal translation of it is so clear. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful expression. David?
No.
Yeah, you do know it, David. Hamotze mechaveiro alav haraya. You must have heard that. Hamotze mechevaro. Somebody who wants to extract. Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Okay? He who extracts bread from the ground. Hamotzi mechavero, somebody who wants to extract from his fellow. Alav, upon him, hara'aya, is the proof. So the proof is on the claimant. So in our case, Larry, where the guy comes and says, you owe me 100. The other fellow says, no, I owe you 60. I'll pay you the 60. The claimant who wants the other 40 would have to bring a proof. If there is no proof, if he brings a proof and the court accepts his proof, then he has to pay the 40. Where there is no proof, then the defendant, as it were, the one who says, I don't owe you this money, can take an oath that he doesn't owe the money and he doesn't have to pay. And it's that way round because of the burden of proof being on the claimant. Hamotzi mechaveiro alav haraya. It's a very well-known expression. If you're in yeshiva world, it's not said quite like that, as you will understand. But that's the concept. The concept is he who extracts or wants to extract from his fellow, upon him is the proof or the burden of proof. So that's why he gets the opportunity, as it were, to make an oath, and he doesn't have to pay the remainder.
Thank you.
Now, where were we now? We were back in here. We went, oh yes, we were talking about claiming and loaded. That's right, that's where we went to. We went off at a tangent into charges and loaded and all that stuff. Excellent. Right, now, what's the time? We've got a few more minutes. So we made a distinction here between the two cases because hair becomes more valuable the longer it's left on the head, and fully ripened grapes become less valuable the longer they're left on the vine, because there comes a point where they get to the, I suppose, the tipping point where they start to deteriorate. Okay, that is the end of that subject. Okay, we are now going to get to the X-rated stuff that I promised you at the beginning of this shiur. We will just start it today. I need a hard finish because I've got another meeting at 11:20, but we'll start it. We've come to a little S, but before we go on to that, has anybody got any questions regarding the last piece of Gemarah that we did, which in total was about the valuation of people, land, and movable objects, as per the pasuk in Sefer Vayikra, the psukim in Sefer Vayikra, which mentioned the Kohen 10 times. We questioned our Mishnah, said right at the beginning that it was 3. Rabbi Yehuda said it was 3. And I think it was Rabbi Shimon said it was 5, if I'm not mistaken. And then we had a whole discussion, and then it was 9 plus 1 for land. That was all about valuation. We finished the subject of valuation now. Has anybody got any questions on that topic before we move on to the next topic? No. Okay, good. Right. Now, the Gemarah, as we've said many, many times, expects you to know the Mishnah off by heart. Our Gemarah here quotes 2 words and then goes on to talk about nothing to do with those 2 words. It goes on to talk about the words that come after those 2 words. And what it's doing here is just giving you a pointer to what it's going to talk about next. This is the beginning of the little section of the Mishnah, and I'm going to turn back to the Mishnah in a minute to show you. The beginning of the Mishnah, the beginning of the section of the Mishnah that he wants to talk about, but rather bizarrely, it quotes 2 words and then says, I'm not going to talk anything to do with that at all. So let's just go back to the Mishnah. Here we go. Here's our Mishnah. You will find it here. You'll find it on page 8 of your Steinsaltz Gemarahs. You'll find it on the very first page of the Gemarah if you're in a regular Gemarah. And this is what it says. Dinei nefashot, Capital cases. Who can remember without looking in how many judges we need for a capital case? Julia, I think you mouthed it correctly.
It's 23, but I had already looked.
Oh, you're so honest. 23, yes, 23 judges for a capital case. And now the Mishnah, and there's a full stop. I know we don't have full stops in the Mishnah, but Rav Steinsaltz puts one in there. And then it goes on to tell us the next thing. Harovea v'hanirba be'esrim u'shlosha. Somebody who copulates with an animal or allows an animal to copulate with her or him. In other words, one has sexual relations with an animal, either as the active member of the act or the passive member of the act. Either way, rovea is the active verb, nirba is the passive verb. 23 judges are required. 23 judges are required. And it quotes a pasuk, Shene'emar, as we say in the verse in Leviticus 20:16, which I'll show you in a minute, V'haragta et ha'isha ve'et ha'behema, and you shall kill the woman and the animal. Ve'et ha'behema taharogu, and the animal you shall kill. Now that's what the Mishnah said. Let's now go back to the Gemarah. And you can see that the Gemarah just says dinei nefashot. Doesn't even mention the roveya v'nirba. Now you could argue that it's doing so because it doesn't want to talk about these things, but that can't be the answer because it's going to go on and talk about it in detail. So it's because this is the beginning of the clause. And of course, when you are remembering things off by heart, which is what they were doing, it's much easier to remember a section when you start at the beginning. If I was to ask you, for example, those of you that went to non-Jewish schools, to recite the Lord's Prayer, right? You could probably do it if you started with our Lord who art in heaven. And whatever it is, I never did it because I never went to the thing. But whatever, I don't know why I thought of that. Now, what if I said to you, it starts, our Father who art in heaven. That's how it starts, yeah. So you would then be able to carry on. But what if I said to you, start the Lord's Prayer on the third line? You won't be able to do it without starting from the beginning, right? And that's why the Gemarah quotes dinei nefashot, even though we're not going to be talking about it. Because it's in what we are going to be talking about is in the middle of a section, which begins with capital cases, dinei nefashot. So it's giving you the clue to say to yourself, dinei nefashot esrim b'shlosha, haroveh v'anirba, and then you go in, now that you mentioned the animal thing, that's what we're going to talk about. So it's a chapter heading, if you like, or it's the first few words of the section, because if you don't understand that, it actually makes no sense. The Gemarah doesn't make any sense because it says capital cases and then it's not talking about capital cases. Well, it is talking about capital cases. It's talking about certain type of capital cases and not talking about that bit of Mishnah. So that is, I just wanted to point that out, that is a reason that the Gemarah only quotes these two words. You're meant to know it off by heart, but it's helping you to remember it off by heart by starting it at the beginning of the little section that contains the bit we're interested in. Okay. So says the Mishnah, 23 judges are required. 23 judges are required for a person who has sexual relations with an animal, whether it is a male or a female. The Gemarah says this, Ka pasek v'tanei. The Mishnah absolutely, unequivocally states, pasek Can you see the word pasek there? That means the same root as posek. Somebody who is a posek is somebody who makes a decision, a decisor. You would say that today in the Dati Leumi world, Rav Yosef Tzvi Rimon is the main major posek. He is the main person of halacha. In the Haredi world, Rav Chaim Kanievsky was, no longer because he just died, but until he died, he was the main posek. So it's the same word, but in here, it has an element of emphasis. So kol posek v'taneh, the Mishnah clearly and categorically, as it says in the translation here, teaches the following halacha: lo shna. Lo shna. It makes no difference. Rovea zachar v'lo shna rovea nekeva. Makes no difference whether this is an ox that had a relationship with a male or an ox that had a relationship with a female. Just a bit of language here. Lo shna, a very similar modern Hebrew expression. Anyone? How do you say in Hebrew? Makes no difference. Modern Hebrew. Yes, Marcel, unmute and tell us.
Lo meshaneh.
Lo meshaneh. Lo meshaneh. Exactly the same expression. Lo meshaneh. It makes no difference. Literally, lo meshaneh means it does not change anything. Meshaneh is a verb, like medaber. Okay, meshaneh. Lo meshaneh. It doesn't make a difference. Shana means a difference. So lo shna makes no difference. Rovea zachar, whether the rovea, the ox copulates with a male, or nekeva with a female. Okay. Now, I think we'll stop there because I have to go in 4 minutes, and we're going to get stuck into this legal argument about capital cases. So we'll just had that little what's the word, teaser there for the discussion about bestiality, which we're going to talk about in more detail next week. So don't show this Gemarah share to your grandchildren next week. Any questions before we go on what we've done today? Okay, let me just summarize what we did, because then it makes it easier for me for next week. We finished the section about valuations. We had a really interesting bit of etymology with the word tu'una, these vines that were loaded up with grapes, a charger being a mat'en, and David finding for us in next week's parashah the biblical use of the word in terms of loading up. Excellent connection there. And we showed that the two cases, the cases of hair and the cases of grapes, cannot be compared, because grapes, once they reach that point of full growth and ripening, they deteriorate once they're left on the vine, whereas the hair becomes more valuable as it grows longer. And we kicked that comparison out, and then we started on our new subject of bestiality, and I showed you why the Gemara begins with Dinei Nafashot, with the words there, because it's the beginning of a section and it's easier to remember. Okay, final time. Any questions or comments? Yes, David.
Yeah, just one comment. Interesting that the Gemara starts its discussion with Dinei Nefashos of a case not in chronological order, that you might have expected the next subject that the Gemara deals with in 3 lines' time to have come first, because it's in Sefer Shemot, and this one is in Sefer Vayikra.
Okay. That's interesting. That is very interesting, because when I was preparing this year, we'll do it next week, but when I was preparing this year, I had a very similar question, because the Gemarah actually brings the earlier pasuk as an extra to the later pasuk. If you have a look, we'll see it next week.
Yeah.
So that's a perceptive observation. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail next week. Okay.
Before we say goodbye, on behalf of our marital community, we are delighted to be back studying with you in real time, and to all our Talmud buddies, it's great to see you. Thank you.
It's great to have you back. It's great to have you back. And can I say you're both looking really well, Baruch Hashem. I hope you're feeling as well as you look.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. Thank goodness. It was a big success.
Good, Baruch Hashem. May it be
Enjoy the
always
weather,
that way.
everybody. Let's hope for a great rain tonight. Bye-bye.
One last thing before I go. Tonight I will be doing the Monday night tefillah shir because I couldn't do it on Monday night. I'd managed to double book. So tonight at 8 o'clock in person and on Zoom, we will carry on going through Birchat HaShachar. Anyone that wants to come down to Shul or join on Zoom is very welcome. And of course, you can watch that on the recording as well.
Are all of them recorded? Is number 2 recorded? Or
They're all recorded, yes.
because I could find numbers 1 and 3.
I'll
Number
send you
1 froze.
I'll send you a direct link to number 2.
Okay, thank you.
Pleasure. Bye, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you, Johnny.
Thank you.
Bye.